Hello and welcome to All About Billings. We are a show dedicated to discovering the people that make Billings a great place to work and live. We will interview local business people, entrepreneurs, artists, entertainers, and community leaders, and we will learn from their successes, their failures, and their connection to Billings. I'm your host, Nancy Brook with Billings Best Real Estate. And today it is my pleasure to welcome to the show Frosty Erben. Now, Frosty is a fellow realtor, broker, and owner with Keller Williams here in Billings. He has his own team. It's called the Frosty Erben Home Selling Team. I said he should be called the Home Selling Machine. Now, I've known Frosty for over 30 years. He was one of the first people that I met when I returned to Billings after leaving for college, and I bought a house through him many years ago. Frosty has been in Billings most of his life. We'll find all about that and also learn about his careers, his connection with Billings, and he's just an entertaining fellow. So welcome to the show, Frosty.
Well, thank you, Nancy. I'm actually flattered that you asked me to be on this show. I never thought that I would get old enough to be a historical significance when it comes to Billings, Montana. But I guess I am.
Yes, you are. Well, and you were telling me you moved here when you were 5 years old. So where did it all begin, Frosty?
Well, it's an interesting story. It has a lot to do with my father, who was an accountant with what it was called then the Texas Oil Company. They decided to move their headquarters from Casper, Wyoming to Billings, Montana. And during that transition, they decided to take the Billings office to Texas. My dad told them no way he was moving to Texas, quit his job here after we'd moved here, and started the first computer data processing company in the state of Montana back in about 1960.
Wow.
Using those giant IBM card punch machines. The only problem with that was that my dad passed away shortly after he started that. But that is a little bit further into the story than where I should be.
Okay. Well, so what was it like when you first moved here? You were a young tyke, so how was it growing up?
It was an amazing place because the first place that we lived was in a set of apartments that are right behind senior high school, right next to Pioneer Park. What a great place for kids to grow up and play and have fun.
Right.
In the meantime, my dad was doing well with the Texas Oil Company. He was able to purchase a home at 2127 Wyoming Avenue. Now, in that period of time, the end of Billings was at about 9th Street West, which is where those of you that have been around for a while will remember there was a Safeway store there, which over time turned into Cine 7, which is now an event center. But that's where the pavement ended. 2100 block of Wyoming was way out in the country.
Wow.
There was a subdivision out there called the Barnes subdivision that was being developed. All the streets were Broadwater, Wyoming, Yellowstone, on down to Lewis Avenue. I was fortunate enough to go to school at several different schools, and this is what I tell people, is that as I needed to move from one grade to the next, the school district built a new school for me. I started out at Grand Avenue.
Wow.
I did take the bus to Grand Avenue. Shortly after that, they built Miles Avenue.
Okay.
I went to Miles Avenue. Then they built Burlington. Consequently, I went to Burlington. That's when I started to walk to school. After that, they built Lewis and Clark Junior High. I went to that, and then they built West High. I was in the third or fourth graduating class from West High, all basically new schools. So I had that experience.
Wow.
I also had the experience of playing baseball at Burlington Field in Little League, and then moving up through the ranks to Babe Ruth and up to the point where I could have played Legion ball, but that's where my career in baseball stopped.
Right, right. Well, and it sounded like almost a magical childhood living in the country, even though 21st Street West was the country, which is hard to believe.
You are absolutely right. A small subdivision surrounded by cornfields, basically cornfields. That's what I remember. And we were free-range children. I grew up in that period of time when you got up in the morning, you ate breakfast, and your mom said, "Be back by 5." Got on your bicycle, went out and did things.
Right.
You'd come back home at night, and Mom would say, "Well, what'd you do?" And I'd say, "Nothing." And she'd say, "Where'd you go?" And I'd say, "Everywhere." "Oh, well, sit down, let's have some dinner." That was about the way it was.
And so what have you seen with the changes in Billings? I
Oh
mean,
my gosh.
what is your perspective on that? So coming from a time when, man, there still were cornfields in town to now, I mean, town is 5 miles further west.
It's unbelievable from my perspective when I take time to reflect. The things that we did as kids, the travels that we had. Just to give you an example, I can reflect back then to what is today. We would get on our bicycles and just take off. And one of the favorite places that we would go is out to what was 24th Street then, head south on 24th Street to the Sage Theater.
Right.
If anybody remembers that.
I do.
We used to have outdoor theaters. We had 3 of them here in Billings. The City View, the Motor View, and the Sage. But just beyond the Sage was the headquarters of Midland Materials, which was Malcolm Long's business. What I have in perspective is how someone like Malcolm and his company could make millions of dollars crushing the gravel that was in that pit, and then figure out a way to fill it back in and turn it into some of the most valuable commercial property in the city of Billings. And he did the same thing in Casper, Wyoming.
Huh.
But a very future-minded, far-sighted individual who was very frugal. I knew a lot about Mr. Long over the years because I had a chance to work with some people who worked for him and gave me some insights into his philosophy. But that was one of the things that we used to do. And the other thing that we did was we would take off on our bikes and head up to the rims. We did things around the rims that if our mothers knew what we were doing, they would have had a heart attack.
It is funny though, because I remember growing up when we just would go out and play all day and nobody would think anything of it. I guess we'd go home if we were hungry. And that was just the way it was. Nobody was concerned about, well, where is my kid all day?
Nope.
Now, I mean, we'd be accused of child abuse or neglect if we did that
No
with
cell
our children.
phones, no way to
Right.
be in contact with your child unless they got a call from the cops or something. But that never happened to us, honestly. And you grew up in Laurel, so you got that same
Yeah.
rural, watch it grow kind of mindset.
Yeah, exactly. It just simpler times when we used to, I mean, make forts out of trees and go play all day. And it was magical, like I said, probably as
Yeah,
well for you from your
same.
experience. Yeah.
But again, to watch this town grow, one of the adventures we had when we were a kid, just to give us a little perspective, was every once in a while we would be dropped off at the Boxer Babcock Theater to go to a movie. And I can remember this like it was yesterday. We were dropped off to see the Lone Ranger movie. I was an absolute dyed-in-the-wool Lone Ranger fan. That Lone Ranger was on television, and it was one of those shows that we'd watch after school. We got in the line to go to the show, and this is no joke, got to the ticket booth, and the lady said, "Sorry, we're sold out." We were dropped off downtown, expected to be picked up after the movie. What do we do? It was myself and my brother and my next door neighbor, Kip Eastman, well, being the far-sighted individuals that we were. we thought, well, let's go see what's over at the Fox. We had the money for a ticket. What they were showing at the Fox was Fantasia. We did not realize that Fantasia is like a 4-hour movie. Consequently, when my mother came to pick us up, we weren't outside. And there were, again, no cell phones.
Right.
We'd spent all of our money. We didn't have a dime for the payphone. But we decided that we would walk home. From downtown to the 2100 block of Wyoming is a long ways.
Sure.
And of course, when we got home, we got the chewing out of our lives. We got grounded. Don't you ever do that. My mom was beside herself because she thought for sure we'd been kidnapped. Anyway, that was just to give myself a little perspective on how far out of town we lived. Today, that's nothing, of course.
No, that's pretty much in the heart of Billings.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So you've had many careers throughout the years. Let's talk a little bit about your background. That's always interesting
I'll
to me.
talk about the progression. This even leans back into the Fox and Babcock days. My friend Joe and I were fortunate enough to get a job with the theater to change the marquee when we were 16 years old. That was a pretty much premier little job to have.
Sure.
When a new movie came to town, we would go gather the letters up that were necessary to change the marquee. There were two things about that that were important. Number one, you better not misspell a word, because we were right on the point back then. That was when everybody cruised the point around 28th Street to 2nd Avenue down to about 25th and back around on 3rd all night long, trying to meet up with friends and girls and what have you. Consequently, you better not misspell a word when you were putting up the marquee. The second part of that you might find interesting is you've heard stories about the tunnels that are under Billings.
Yes.
That at one time there was, as I understand it, there was a heat system that was designed that would send steam heat from a center boiler all around the downtown. Consequently, there were underground passageways that would allow you to do that. The letters that were stored for the marquees were downstairs in that area. And from there we could walk over to what was North 28th between 1st and 2nd, all the way from one store to the next that was underneath the businesses that were upstairs, and then all the way back to Lincoln Junior High. Well, I got a chance to sort of goof around underneath there. Never caused any trouble, but that was one of our adventures. As far as employment is concerned, I always worked at something. After my father died, my mother remarried, and she remarried a gentleman who was a little bit older and owned a drugstore. His name was Orrin Hart, and he had Hart's Drug and Surgical Appliance. So I worked for him as a soda jerk.
Soda jerk, wow.
There are some people that think I'm still a jerk, but I got the soda part down quite well. Worked there, had my own little lawn mowing service. I worked as a janitor for a while, but the job that I sought out after I got married was working for a company that stripped crawler tractors for used parts. I thought I was going to be a mechanic. I went to work for that company, and I guess because of my personality and my ability to interact with people, the boss came to me one day and said, "Frosty, you need to be a salesman. You're gonna sell construction equipment." And I told him, I said, "I don't know how to sell anything." He gave me two of the greatest pearls of wisdom I ever got. Number one, he said, "Son, your clients will teach you everything you need to know." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Every time they ask you a question you can't answer, get the answer so that you'll have it available for the next time you get asked that question." That was very, very valuable knowledge. I was actually very successful at that. I sold, just for your knowledge, a few of the things I sold were ditch witch trenchers, Vermeer tree spades and trenchers. Bobcat loaders was my favorite. learned how to sell those things. And then for one reason or another, about 10 years after I got into that, the company that I was working for at the time was having some financial problems and really couldn't afford me. I thought I would take a bobcat loader and go into business for myself.
Sure.
I started a company called Rockhound Landscaping, and what my specialty was lawn preparation for a company that did hydro seeding.
Okay.
I built that into a full-scale landscaping company, and I can say this today, in the worst decade that you could probably try to start a business on a shoestring, the 80s. I worked very hard at building that company up to a point where hopefully it would sustain me, but I was never able to do it. During that period of time is when I came to the conclusion that I needed to make a change, and that's when I made the change into real estate.
Well, and I imagine that was a pretty hard time to go through, the whole realizing, because you had spent years developing this landscaping business and realizing that you were not going to be able to succeed at it. What was that like? That must have been heart-wrenching for you.
I'm a very positive person. I've always had a tremendous positive attitude. However, there comes a time when you have to be a realist. The economic times back then were peppered with different things that happened to the economy. And one of them was the big stock market breakdown in 1987, 1988. Really caused a lot of problems. We were dealing with high interest rates. The people that were able to buy homes at that time didn't have any money left over for landscaping. That's where my niche was. My niche was in landscaping, from lawn preparation, sprinkler irrigation, hardscapes, those types of things that I was very good at. However, competition was tight. I was dealing with folks that didn't necessarily play by the rules. I tried to be as legitimate as I could possibly be, hiring people and paying Social Security withholding and what have you, when I was dealing with people that were paying under the table and what have you. Consequently, the profit structure wasn't there that I needed to really sustain myself. I needed to look for another thing to do, and that's when I thought about real estate and thought maybe I could do that in the winter and it would help me propel my landscaping business in the summer. But I found out very quickly that real estate was a better opportunity in a lot of different ways.
Sure. So was there any big takeaway that you learned from your business failing or shutting down your business?
Well, one of the things that happened along the way was a couple of folks that were very successful in town knew what happened to me. And they tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Son," he said, "most of the well-to-do people in this world have had one or two failures before that happened. Just take it for what it's worth. You know that you learned a lot during that process and benefit from it." And I did in a lot of different ways. I'm not a quitter. I just have used that foundation to propel me a little bit further into what I do. And I've been at this for 36 years, and it's done a tremendous job for me from the standpoint of producing a lifestyle that's probably better than one that I would have had if I'd gone to college, which I didn't do.
Sure. And the real estate, how did you come up with that idea?
I came up with that idea from the landscaping perspective.
Okay.
Here I was putting my fingerprint on the earth with my landscaping company, and I thought, well, I need to have a lead into homes and yards. Why not use real estate to do that and combine the two together? The difference between the two, of course, is that real estate doesn't require a lot of equipment. It doesn't require a lot of labor. I woke up to the fact that it was a much better opportunity from the standpoint of cost and personnel. I was able to make way more money by myself than I was as a business owner in a business that was totally dependent upon whether or not people had money to pay for the landscaping after they purchased a home.
Right.
I thought, well, let's get on front of that and sell the house and not worry about what happens afterwards. However, knowing what I knew about landscaping gave me insights into what I could do to give people ideas on what they could do themselves, or if they lived in an existing home, to be able to make modifications, enhancements, things of that nature.
When you've seen Billings go through a lot of economic cycles, especially in the 36 years since you've been involved in real estate, what is the most significant changes that you've seen?
Well, I'll tell you what the most significant thing about Billings is, it never really seemed to stop growing. In other words, what was happening in the world, what was happening in the United States, gave truth to the saying that all real estate markets are local. And Billings, to a large degree, is not affected the same way other places in the country are. We have a very stable economy, we have a very diverse economy, and even though real estate slowed down, and it was affected to some degree by interest rates and the supply and demand, it's never stopped. It's never stopped growing. In fact, I'm surprised, being in this business and driving around from time to time, I'll drive by a place that didn't have a house in it 6 months ago, and there's a whole new subdivision there. They just keep investing in real estate from the standpoint of knowing, and I know this too, that Billings, Montana wants to grow. It's a very attractive place for people to look, knowing that it's the crossroads between Denver and Calgary, Minneapolis and Spokane. That's why we see things like these giant warehouses that are going up in anticipation of companies wanting to settle here. We've got the Targeted Economic Development District in Lockwood looking to build a commercial industrial area that will attract people. And on top of that, of course, we work in an environment that says to us, a large component of our growth is going to be centered around affordable, attainable workforce housing. That's something that I keep my finger on through different volunteer organizations that I participate in, as well as our Billings Association of Realtors has several committees that are working and focusing on doing whatever we can possibly do to help create affordable housing in Billings, Montana.
Well, it is challenging for especially Native people because it seems like housing prices have gone up and up and up, and those who grew up here sometimes are priced a little bit out of the market. I think that's the biggest change I've seen in the past 3-4 years. It seems like it's really hard to get that foot in the property ladder, so to speak.
It's an effect of, I guess, capitalism. It's supply and demand.
Right.
And I don't want to get political here, but the thing that happened that caused the biggest problem in terms of why we don't have affordable housing is when the pandemic occurred and when the powers that be determined that one of the ways to stimulate the economy was to lower interest rates. But by lowering interest rates, it made it very attractive for anybody who wanted a house to get a house. And once that bottom end of the inventory went away, we were definitely in a upward spiral of increasing prices based on supply and demand, and we're still there. We're so far behind the curve on making or building new homes that I don't know when we'll get caught up.
Why do you think people are coming to Billings? So a lot of people don't consider Billings the most scenic place in Montana. Bozeman, Kalispell, Missoula, Helena, they're all considered to be more of that Montana feel. Yet I think Billings has sustained tremendous growth, especially since 2020. Why do you think that is?
There are a lot of factors that affect why people move to this part of Montana. It's still one of the most affordable places in Montana. As we move west and we move north, prices have always been higher than they have been here because it's attractive from the standpoint of recreational opportunities, the mountains, the trees, the scenery, things of that nature. Plus there's also a good lifestyle in those areas too. Billings is a very stable economy, and it has always been somewhat affordable. But as we've looked at the last 10 years or so, people are focusing in not only on leisure time activities, lifestyle, the economy, they're also looking at it from the standpoint of, is it a safe place to live from the standpoint of weather activity? Do we have tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, fires, things of that nature that seem to be peppering the United States? Some folks are taking their insurance money, moving to Montana because it's a safer environment.
You know, that's really an interesting perspective, because we were just talking about that there's just not a lot of natural disasters, maybe except hail,
Yeah,
which you can recover from hail. Tornado, it's a little more challenging, or a wildfire.
I see those disasters occurring on television, and I say to myself, I am really glad that I'm not in the real estate business in that area.
Yeah, for sure.
And the other thing that bothers me or comes to my mind is when something like that happens, what do they do with all the debris? Where does that go?
Yeah.
That affects us from the standpoint that we talk about increasing prices. Every time there's a disaster like that, it affects the cost of building materials, because those people have to rebuild and they have to use those resources to do that with, and consequently we get back into that supply and demand situation that fuels inflation.
Sure. Well, so as we're wrapping up here with the last 30 seconds, what would you say is the biggest event that you can see happening in Billings' future?
That's a really good question. I'm not in touch with every individual in Billings that drives the economy and the improvements that they think are necessary. But I think the biggest thing that's going on in Billings is the fact that we're going to be putting in another water treatment plant on the west end to stimulate growth out that way.
Yeah, that's really a good point. Well, folks, thank you very much, Frosty, for allowing us to hear from you and the history of Billings. Until next time, we hope to see you on All About Billings.